Welcome everyone to another session of Your Desk University. We've had a blast over the past month bringing you tech experts virtually. My name is Tim and Hazel. Tonight we have another great host. My coworker Jared from Walter P. Moore is joining us and will be moderating the panel of AEC tech experts whose daily lives include digital twins, point clouds, photogrammetry, tracking spaces, and generative urban planning. This is going to be quite the show. And our moderator, Jared, avid Python programmer and building tech enthusiast. He joined Walter P. Moore from WeWork and teaches extra classes in his free time. With that, I'll turn it over to him to start the show. Have fun, everyone. I'll see you over in the chat.
Thanks, Timon. Welcome, everyone. And thanks for joining. And thank you, Timon, for all the energy that you've put into hosting a lot of the previous panels and episodes so far. So we're excited to have everyone. I guess quick note for the next presentation coming up will be on Tuesday of next week. It'll be Dana De Filippi. We'll be talking about using Dynamo in kind of how you deploy it into a larger kind of office space and how you make it more user-friendly for the people in the office. So it should be a really good one. So be sure to tune in for that. So for this week, the AEC industry over the last couple of decades has focused primarily on when you think about BIM and digital workflows, it's been a lot about kind of like the building delivery process and producing documentation and getting from point A to point B. But as technology and the industry has evolved, particularly over the last few years, we've seen a lot of new types of models of practice popping up, and that are a lot of them are very much focused on spatial data and thinking about other ways in which we can use a lot of the technology that architects and engineers are already using, and bring other types of value to different types of clients and things like that. This panel, is something we haven't really done quite yet, but the overall format will be that I'm gonna introduce everyone real quick, and then each of our presenters is gonna give a 5-minute kind of like very quick, high level, like this is what kind of they're doing, because some of it is very different from the typical architecture and engineering workflows. So it'll be really helpful to kind of understand what they're talking about and connect, a picture to it. And then following each of those presentations, then we'll kind of jump into a discussion. So without further ado, I'll introduce everyone. First up, Chantal heads up design strategy at Integrated Projects, where she partners with public and private institutions to enable the digital transformation of their real estate portfolios at scale. She's obsessive about capturing spatial data and establishing feedback loops. Chantal is a design technology leader with experience in scaling design delivery from concept to construction. Prior to Integrated Projects, Chantal managed research initiatives to create and leverage spatial data sets for global rollouts in WeWork's Construction Innovation Studio. Next up, we have Betty, and Betty is a computational designer at Sidewalk Labs, focusing on building objective functions of environmental simulations and urban analysis with software engineers and product designers for generative urban design, a digital planning assistance tool. And prior to Sidewalk Labs, she has worked at SOM, AS plus GG, Pay Partnerships Architects, and all those with a focus on geometry optimization and rationalization through parametric modeling, algorithmic design, and computational analysis for architectural and urban scale projects. And last but not least, we have Mary. Mary is the head of customer success for North America for Willow Inc., a real estate technology company based out of Sydney, Australia. At Willow, Mary guides the future partnerships between Willow and their customers. She defines the key problems to solve, often describing her work as helping our partners figure out if they want socks or warm feet, what the real issue is, and how data can help us solve it. Mary has spent the last 10 years working in architecture, construction technology, and education. She has worked with leaders in the design industry, including Kieran Timberlake Architects, Atelier Jean Nouvel, and most recently as manager in the Construction Innovation Studio at the Lee Company. So I'll just from here, I'll hand it off to you guys. We'll kind of ask you guys to present in that order. So Chantal, then Betty, then Mary. So Chantal, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Hi guys, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. Jared, thanks so much for organizing this. This is probably the most meta panel I've ever been a part of. We're talking a Zoom embedded in a YouTube live, so it's kind of fun. I'm going to share my screen here. I've got a few slides, and I'll introduce a little bit of background for integrated projects. As Jared mentioned, I head up design strategy at Integrated Projects. We are globally a company of 22, but in New York sits the executive team. We are a small core group here and very interdisciplinary, so everything ranging from product, data science, architecture, VDC, operations. We've got a couple of previous tech founders as part of the team. And then everywhere else in the world, we've got kind of boots on the ground doing reality capture. We call ourselves a building intelligence company. And what we do is we partner with institutions worldwide to enable the digital transformation of their real estate portfolios at scale. And the way that we do that is we start with reality capture at the very base, and then we produce a series of models and assets to be able to extract spatial data sets. Globally, we've scanned about 3.2 million square feet at this point. The company itself is only about 2 years old as of last month. So we had a really great year last year, and we got to work with some really exciting clients that have helped us grow to this point. What we're hearing from our clients in terms of pain points, they range, but because we work with both owners and operators, we've kind of seen a trend. So when you think about design delivery and then the spatial data sets that we're creating, we're as a company starting at the building scale and oftentimes even just at the floor scale. So we're kind of at one end of the spectrum, which then probably extends all the way to Sidewalk slabs and like the city scale of data. And time is obviously oftentimes an issue for delivery teams. Accuracy is a big problem when we're talking about building data, and cost. And with the growing access to scanning technologies and the BIM technology that we have available, we've kind of been able to, through the way that we've structured our team and our delivery process, we've been able to shrink the time and cost problem and really have been able to focus on the accuracy for our clients. And our solution, we see kind of touching different aspects of the business. So for us, it's been most of the discovery for clients has been around how do we make building data relevant to the business. And we see the assets that we create and the data we pull kind of touching actually kind of all aspects of the business, including the design teams, including construction, the ones that you would normally expect, but also operations, acquisition, sales, leasing, marketing. There are parts of the process that have become relevant and accessible through the way that we deliver it. So I mentioned our process goes from sort of digitizing is what we call our first phase. So that's literally going in with reality capture devices with LiDAR scanners, capturing the entire space, and then creating a 3D BIM model out of that with all of the systems that are exposed. And then being able to, even depending on the client, distilling down the ingredients of that space, the program, the equipment, the assets, anything that they want tracked, we're able to track for them. And then the way that we deliver that information is where we really get excited. So I think when we think of typical delivery, it's usually a PDF or some files emailed. We're now transitioning our business into a product as well. And so our services have been sort of the discovery for the tool that we're developing. And version 1.0 right now is a platform that delivers both the assets as well as the spatial data. And what we can start to do is pull metrics for clients such as square footage counts, being able to make accessible understanding how these systems all fit together for people that aren't typically in Revit. And then going so far as to start to do analytics on that space depending on the use case. So analyzing program breakdowns, test fit metrics, density, all kinds of those things. And we see this as kind of creating the backbone for then live data to be layered on top and be connected to an accurate 2D and 3D representation of the space. And what we're working on now, which is very much still under development, is a platform we're calling IPX, but it's a version kind of 2.0 of the web delivery that we've been doing, where the client will be able to eventually see their entire portfolio at scale and then drill down to projects and kind of break open this whole world of interacting with the spatial data. I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand it over to Betty. I think it's going next.
Cool. Thank you, Chantal. Let me share my screen. Cool. Thank you for inviting me also. And Chantal gave a very good presentation. I think mine is going to be very brief. So I'll leave more time for Mary. So Sidewalk Labs is an Alphabet company. It's that the company is focusing on improving urban life. And so the company has gathered a group of very talented people and experts from various fields to work together on this like multiple aspects of this. And we believe in a holistic planning approach that integrates physical and digital innovations to provide urban environments that will ensure quality of life. And generative urban design is one product area within Sidewalk Labs. It is applying a range of computational methods and approaches to the problem of district scale urban design, planning, and development. And it is the product team that I'm currently working in. It's aiming to optimize for priority outcomes, aiming to also produce a clear understanding of trade-offs. So I myself, as a computational designer, I have a mixed background of urban and architectural design and computation. So I constantly work between domain experts. The focuses for this role are around defining and encoding complex systems and questions, exploring the process of maximizing design performance, and finally unpack and extract the insights from design decisions.
Thanks, Betty. Let me share my screen. Jared, I work for a company called Willow, Inc. We are the digital twin for the built world. And I know that today that's a pretty big buzzword, but I will say that we started back in 2017, but officially as Willow, and previously we were Ridley. So that company has been around since 2010, which is why we are 180 employees. We have 10 global offices, I think in every continent, and we are headquartered in Sydney, Australia. What we do is we primarily focus in two major industries, in the real estate industry and the rail industry, actually. I'm on the real estate side, and one of the things we focus on is the amount of data that's lost after the design and construction phases are complete. We all know that we create an amazing amount of data during those stages, and then after we hand over the buildings during operations, a lot of that information gets lost. So we work to de-silo systems, to connect systems that are otherwise limited, and extract data to make it purposeful. And what we build for our real estate clients is basically a single source of truth. And that is, you could think of anything that has live data or static data. So we pull in all the information from construction, all those submittals, handover, we actually de-risk, which is a powerful hook for us. And we pull all that information together. We do the hard work of we have a great team who validates all of this data, who tracks it, manages it during construction, and in order to facilitate a digital twin, so that we can bring everything together for the operational teams who are our primary clients at the end of this. And as I speak to operational teams, one of the big things that we talk about here is being reactive and proactive. And you know, the 1 or 2 year, depending on the scale, the 2 to 3 years of building construction, that timeline is nothing compared to the 60 or 70 years of the life of the building in these day and age. And so what we try to do is we try to allow the teams operating those buildings over that time to be proactive. Specifically, we give them information for preventative and predictive maintenance. What we do is we bring all the data, so think your BMS, your lighting systems, your spatial data. We bring all of that together so that into a single interface, so that all the technology can speak to each other, and so that we can drive actionable insights across a building, and then we actually expand that to portfolios. Another feature of our technology, and this is a real shot from our rail technology and our rail team. we actually can put out an Uber-like, literally Uber, the car, Uber-like maintenance call. So we can take all this data, create actions or recommendations, and then put that out to a maintenance crew. And this is what that looks like at scale. This is a photo of, this is our rail team in Structon, and they have what I call a Houston of NASA for the rail industry over their portfolio in Europe. And I'll say that this, just to note, this is primarily operations. This is all operations and maintenance for our large rail client, Structon. This is their home base, and they run 22,000 kilometers of rail off of this. And this is what we're currently building out for our real estate teams, our real estate partnerships here in the US, as well as existing partners in Sydney. And that's it.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thought those were really helpful to see, really great presentations. To start, maybe just a bit of a softball question, but I think it is kind of important to note that you guys are all kind of architecture backgrounds and are now kind of working in these kind of hybrid roles that deal with spatial data and thinking about things beyond just design as like an architect would kind of typically approach it. For each of you to answer would be, one, kind of what made you interested in taking the route that you've taken and in the role that you're in now, and then second part would be is what skills or skill did you pick up in your architecture training that you've found to be kind of like the most helpful within your current role?
So your two questions, I would say for me, so background in architecture, as you mentioned, twice I decided I was going to be an architect for educationally. But what I found is that for me, architecture was a little too constricting. As I mentioned, one of the things that the company I work for now, Willow, does now is they work primarily in operations, which has a much longer timeline typically than just designing and then constructing a building, right? So the timeline for that is far greater. And so that is what interested me, right? Like we design something, we build something, and typically we walk away from it. And so I was really interested in the next 50 years. What are the operations like here? How do the materials I assumed would do well actually perform? What improvements did they make 5 years later? Because like the ceiling is leaking. I went to school in an Eisenman building, and that was just like he designed it to fall down. That was the purpose of the building. 10 years later, it was there, but leaking. So I was very interested in the operations and like how we built something, how it was sustained, and then how people operated them. So it was a natural progression, as well as my love of data. I mean, most of us here have a love of data and technology, and I think this was the right path for me. But then I'll say from architecture, to answer the second question, what skills from architecture apply now? I would say that all of them do. And I really mean that, because when you're speaking to someone to a client who knows that you understand how the building began, how it was constructed, and then now I'm learning how it's operated, that end-to-end understanding, because we always think that way in architecture, right? We think from the pencil to the beam. That understanding is one of the strongest pieces, like just that I have, like that level of information. And being able to take a thread and tie it through all those different timelines is an incredibly powerful thing for any of us to do in the design world, coming into a different industry. They see you able to connect things, and it's pretty powerful. So I'd say the skills are incredibly transferable. Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, I guess we'll go with Betty next.
Sure, yeah. I think for me is the holistic view of spatial data can review and the missing or underlying nature of a problem or a question. I think very so often that when we tackle a design problem, that we compose some of the relevance that we think that this problem will start to engage, but in reality, there might be a lot more that underlying going on. So I think one thing that I learned a lot, just also from my urban design background, that there's a lot more that a building can connect to, and then there's a lot more a neighborhood that can connect to, and there's multiple levels that they're interacting and interconnecting with each other. So this is, and I saw the power of accelerated understanding of all this like complex layer of design problems that we were trying to solve. I think the time what Mary mentioned, from my point of view, also we're very limited in revealing the complex problem to be able to understand or even find answers or find patterns that can help us to lead to the end, the results or answers. So that's why I think utilizing technologies or be able to unpack so much data in a very clear way is very compelling for me to answer a lot of these design questions. So I guess very much related to that, for me, I think systematic thinking that I learned from architecture training is very, very helpful for me right now, because a lot of my role and my practice now is encoding and understanding problems into or design problems, complex problems, into something that's readable by either computation methods or humans or any like later process that this needs to go in as an input. So I believe this is one approach. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of approaches, but this is one approach that I think will make design available for others.
Awesome. Thanks, Betty. And Chantal?
Yeah, I'll kind of echo Mary's statement. I also, chose twice to go to architecture school, undergrad and graduate. 5 years of education, I was convinced 7 years of education, I was convinced I was going to become a licensed architect, and then I jumped at the first opportunity to not be in architecture. And I think one of the skills that you learn in architecture school, and that's kind of really transferable, is just like a relationship thinking, being able to draw relationships between different systems and scales is really a powerful tool to think through a problem. And in school, you're kind of asked to solve, the world of problems with architecture. And because of that, and because my graduate school was very focused on kind of programmatic approach to design, you kind of had to invent programs and invent problems and then treat it as a user problem almost. I became really interested in the inputs and the rule sets to make design decisions, and like this kind of way of design thinking. That's very much like a problem solving approach. So it was less about form, but more so about the set of rules that would go into the ingredients of the design. And because of that, started getting really into the data sets. New York City, obviously, those are really available as well, which is great. All the open data that they have. And at the time, Airbnb had made their data available. So that was the first time I kind of interacted with a spatial data set of locations across different cities with different program components, kind of like the listing data and all kinds of those things, and became really obsessed with that. Was really interested in WeWork's data set, couldn't get my hands on it, and then went and worked for them. And so that's kind of, I went straight from architecture school completely into a different thing. But I think the skills that you learn and the way you think about things as an architect, you're kind of being asked to attack problems that aren't necessarily just your discipline. You have to think holistically. And so that's something that I still apply every day. When we're thinking about these different data sets, always think about how at the end of the day you're going to use it. Data is great if you have it, but it's kind of useless at the end of the day unless you can turn it into information and make it actionable. And so I always try to bring it back to who's going to be using it, why are they going to be using it, and at the end of the day, what problem is it solving?
Oh, awesome. So I was just, one of the things that you guys kind of each just mentioned in one way, either explicitly or another, thinking about the inputs into like your workflows, and each of you kind of are working with different types of inputs, whether it be kind of, more of an existing building or some sort of large real estate kind of database, or if it's I'm not sure, Betty, exactly what the inputs are for you guys, but maybe you can answer that in this question that I'm trying to formulate. But basically, I guess the question is, what are the kinds of inputs that you are working with specifically, and then how are those informing, or how are those providing value to the end user, the client, or whoever it is?
I guess I'll take that first. This is, I think this answer to this question is very much related to the project itself. Our tool takes in any data that related to an urban development project, but in terms of the question, what we're answering for, it kind of demands on different types and different level of details and fidelity of the data that come in. So the as at an urban scale, I think Chantal probably mentioned something. The accuracy and level of details that you require for urban project is different than a building scale. So the way that we calculate or we use our inputs are more often understanding trade-offs and relationships with each other inside this one urban project. So the inputs can come in from either our customers, their understanding the geographic, and also environmental simulations like weather data, and anything that more downscale to, for example, demographics. So it's really multiple layers and really project dependence. Yeah, I don't know, maybe other people can chime in for more information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting because you're able to kind of take different data sets and that were oftentimes maybe even created for a completely different purpose and then retool them for your use. On the other side of the spectrum, we always start with the data sets that we ourselves create, which is point clouds. So it's a very different scale and level of accuracy, like you mentioned, where we're not creating these like crazy huge data sets for industry-wide or city-wide conditions. We're going in and we're literally scanning one floor of a building, but we have to do it to less than an inch of accuracy for our model to be valuable to the client oftentimes. And the trade-off is if we don't do that and you create a model and something's missing, that client then immediately questions the entire group of assets or the entire 3D or 2D representation. The trust is gone. So for us, accuracy is extremely important. And it's because we're creating specific data sets rather than generally applicable ones. Oftentimes, right now, that data set is only relevant to that client and the spatial product that they're creating, whether that's a series of corporate offices for their employees, a flex office operator with a very specific look and feel to their co-working product, a luxury gym space. So they all have very separate, different ingredients. Some of them obviously kind of align, but starting with that point cloud data and then extrapolating everything from there is kind of the way that we end up going.
Mary, anything to add there?
Yeah, this is one of the hardest questions actually, one I field all day long. Like what do you do with the data? For us is typically what a client's asking, right? Like what's the value proposition?
Also, like what is the data, like in your case?
Yeah. So honestly, it varies. So if you guys could imagine the newest building in New York, it probably is one of the smartest buildings in New York. It has a very advanced BMS. It has like building access and security data that is live that people can see from, imagine like a security room. Everything is smart. Everything is tied in. A Lutron lighting system, for instance, that's a data loop right there. So anything, and then add that to utility data, add that to metering, add that to elevators. I mean, the age of the building and the time we work with our clients determines how much data exists. So a great example is right now we're doing a pilot project with a large real estate company, and we are taking 15 buildings of theirs and putting them online. And it ranges from industrial, residential, hotel, and commercial office space. So we have four types, all different ages, and 15 buildings. And literally we are trying to see what we can get from all of those different things. So if I have a very, very smart building, I can give you almost anything. I can give you command and control, which is like read and write access to your BMS system. I can turn off all the lights with my phone on all the floors. If I have an industrial site, I can tell you how much energy you're using. That's it. So it's really what's available. And then part of our model is trying to help clients understand what they can do if they did that, right? So if you want X, you need to do Y and Z. Or if you don't have Z, you can only do, A. I don't know what the formula would be. So it's actually an incredibly strange matrix of possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I guess that kind of the follow-up question to that would be, and you've already started to touch upon it, Mary, was like, once you have that input, once you have that data, what are the biggest challenges that you guys see in terms of like translating that into something that you communicate? So like with Mary, like one example is like, you just have like all these different types of buildings and there's like very little consistency between them. And so that's like a challenge that you guys have to work through. So so what are you guys all kind of talked a little bit in your presentations about like you each kind of have some sort of like web platform in a lot of cases, or that you're using to communicate. But like from getting from the data to that platform, like what are the biggest hurdles that you guys are seeing? Maybe we'll go Betty, Chantal, and Mary. Or actually, no, that's what we just did. Let's mix it up. We'll go Chantal, Betty, and Mary.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think so since I manage the whole execution process, kind of like the delivery process, one of my biggest hurdles for our team is it's physical. It's manual efforts that allow us to translate point cloud data to, at the end of the day, the platform right now, because currently there are no useful or like robust automation that exists to automatically convert a cloud scan to a model. And so what we're having to do is, it's still very analog in some ways, literally to import that point cloud and create a model with a team of Revit experts. And the thing that I can do though is kind of tool our process to at least streamline certain parts of that production. And the interesting aspect at the end of that is I have to talk to our product team all the time to understand, the world of unstructured databases and Amazon servers and like back-end stuff without having a tech background, to be able to know, okay, what kind of parameters and data do we have to load into our models while we're creating them for you to be effectively harvesting our models to create these data sets. So we're creating it from scratch essentially. So it's a slow and arduous process at times. And when we're kind of talking to our clients and in the sales process, it's oftentimes the whole battle is just kind of explaining and helping them understand the value of, at the end of the day, what are you going to do with this data? Because it is a significant effort to actually capture it in the first place. So, I look forward to the world of iPhone scanning and like algorithms to create 3D models, because it's going to like supercharge that whole process. And we can focus on what is the actual interesting part, which is just what we do with all that information at the end of the day. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is just the absolute effort it takes to scan buildings right now. Because as Mary said, they are vastly different. Varying levels of documentation exist, or most of the time don't. And so we walk into most spaces blindly with our scanning machine, and we just kind of take it one step at a time, literally. So that's the state of real estate right now.
Betty?
Sure. Yeah, we are at a very different scale here. So the problem actually kind of related to what Chantal has touched on multiple points. One is that because we're dealing with urban scale projects, so a lot of the data coming in different forms and different levels of details, and they're also coming from different like point of contact people. So for example, we need a design scheme that it will come from the architects. And if we need like a cost modeling data, then we have to ask an estimator. And if we want to understand like energy and sustainability performance of the districts, then we have to ask data from HVAC or a building system contractor. So there are all these different levels of different, let's say, different fields of data that we have to input into our model, and we have to find a way to tie them spatially into our geographically into our space, and understand what are the outputs that our design options are generating on this different terms. So I think the hardest thing for us would be very similar, like how do you align all different kinds of data into one one space structure? And then the other hardest thing for us is how do we find a clear insight from all this multiple levels of um, outputs? And I don't know, maybe I'm jumping too far from inputs to outputs, but this is something related to that we're generating data, but we're not just giving our customers a bunch of data for them to use. But then what level of information that we should generate and would be helpful for them to utilize later on is something that we also try very hard to tackle. But I think it's a very interesting and important problem to solve, that giving it as a tool for people to use, for different people to use, that how different would it be for a different group of people to use.
Thanks. Mary, any other further thoughts?
I
You kind of started to answer the question already on your last one, but if you had any additional thoughts.
would say that I guess our hardest data challenge is that, to be frank, like, and this is really, it sounds minor, but there are no standards for building data. So it sounds really
About IFC.
sounds so minor, right? So anyone listening who, and I am not the subject matter expert in my company on this, but anyone listening who loves BMS systems, like having all of these different, like basically like isolated, like it's like an IoT inside of an IoT, right? Like all these little internets that all only talk to themselves within a building. We are now asking them to talk to each other. And then we're asking that building to talk to other buildings in the portfolio. So you're expanding that reach, and having standards for that data to talk to itself is incredibly difficult because it's not an A to B relationship. It's a relational relationship. So my best example for the tech people on the listening is a brick schema, which is like basically like a BMS kind of schema. That's and it's relational. It's built for buildings, and it says it goes back to root cause, and it is systemic. And so, but that's not a standard anywhere, and so it drives us kind of crazy, frankly. It's minor, but standards for data. It's
Right.
minor, but also gigantic. So
Yeah.
but that's our biggest challenge. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. All right. So I think we probably have around like 10, 15 minutes left in this chat. So let me see if there's any questions people have. Make sure you get them in. Someone on the chat has a question for Betty. The Sidewalk Lab generative urban design demo that you showed, is it already released, or is it a work in process project? I'm guessing well, I'll let you answer. I think I know the answer.
Yeah, it's not released yet, but we do have a demo video available to the public for people to understand what we're doing briefly. And we are still developing it for sure. Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right, I have a couple other questions here that I'd like to try to get through. So one of them was, so each of your companies kind of has some, has either experimented with or already has some sort of version of a software as a service kind of business model that you guys are offering. So I guess the question, again, another two-part question, it would be, what do you guys see as kind of like the pros and cons of this model or the challenges that you're facing with it? And also, is it something that you can see like a traditional architecture or engineering firm adapting and being able to kind of like have the opportunity to provide more than just like handing over plans to the client? So maybe we'll go in reverse of what we did last time. So we'll do Mary, Betty, and Chantal.
So the SaaS model that we have it's tough. Having SaaS at this scale, it's a large price tag. You might imagine if I could say to Oxford Properties, you can manage your entire portfolio in this one room. That's a pretty big price tag that comes along with that, with that promise. And then making sure that you show the value right away, right? You need to really reduce the time to value needs to be incredibly fast. And frankly, where we are right now with the industry, the real estate industry is a slow monster, and they are forward thinking, but they just work at a different pace. Again, they think about the building in 50-year chunks, like this will last me 50 years. So to onboard them to the idea of doing something completely different tomorrow is a little tough. So I would say it makes sense, right? Software for us, because we are selling you a software and we are actually like the data orchestration platform. It's actually part of our service. Like we build that, but it is hard. And I would say when you said design as a service, I wrote down DaaS, like SaaS. I think it would be really smart actually to have design firms start thinking in that mindset, right? How can you actually the GSA does this a bit. They have the design excellence program where you apply, and then for I think 5 years or so you're on their short list, right? What if you could do that with every single client, right? So they're always kind of feeding you work, or you have guaranteed work. That would be interesting. I think it's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think this is for what I understand. I think this pros and cons are kind of almost the same thing for such tool to become a surf. Are you talking about service or product? Sorry, service, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are actually less doing things like service. We'll be as a product that when we release. So service is less kind of for us. We're trying to figure out how we can service through this product. So we want to enable more efficiency and acceleration when we provide our products to our customers. So I think for this industry, the hard problems, there are a lot of them, but one is there are multiple priorities that will happen along different times. So but our tool is meant to accelerate this process, means we want to have all the factors in one at the same time. It's almost like BIM model, but more for like having all different systems or different infrastructure, all different, let's say zoning and permitting or even design into one model or one space, so that we can understand all the trade-offs all at the same time, and we understand what priorities that we can focus on and what other metrics or features that you want to kind of understand that you can sort of give up or not give up, and this kind of thing. So having this as a service is hard for people for projects or customers who do not understand or do not have the capacity to have all factors all in one. And also something that we've touched on is the standardization of inputs, that if interacting with the tool is hard already, then it's like people understanding machine learning, then you're gonna just give up on understanding it or using it. So that becomes something that I think we as a product have to ensure that the usability for our customers is very smooth and easy to use, and including also the deliverables. Sorry. So it's, and the other thing that relates to this is the customization. So I think as a surface, it's somewhat easier for the industry to be able to tackle this problem because you're one-to-one in base and you're doing your work specific for each project. But as a product, it's a little harder to do customization because efficiency is almost the opposite of customization that you want a product to be able to do. So we rely on, I think we want to see the anticipate the potential of using computational methods or approach to enable this. So I don't know, maybe this is something different than what you're asking, but I think this is more related to what we can offer, what we're thinking as for the industry, like AEC industry.
Cool, thanks.
It's really interesting, Betty. I think everything you're saying, I'm like nodding my head because standardization of inputs, how do you balance customization with a product that is, coded and it does some certain things and it doesn't do everything. So that's something that we're dealing with. And I think out of all of us, ours is probably at the earliest stage. We're very much still at like a prototype stage, and it comes with all of the uncertainty and the discovery that we're still doing with customers, where we're still kind of going back and forth on certain features and nothing is completely baked in stone. So there's all these possibilities as we keep deep diving with different clients. So it's very difficult, especially someone not coming from that background, to kind of get in that mindset and accept that we don't know anything and the customer knows everything, because as an architect, we are supposed to know everything and make those decisions ourselves. So that's kind of a retooling of my thinking as well. But it's a great learning experience. And I think by listening rather than making a set of assumptions, we're able to kind of narrow down more and more our product roadmap and eventually launch a completed product that we can test. But it's definitely hard. And something that we're thinking about a lot is this idea of recurring revenue or subscription revenue. And it's kind of a hot topic, I think, right now as well. Sorry, that's my really obnoxious doorbell. I hate it. And so we're for us, like, I think building data changes with construction, right? So something that we're thinking about is our value of the data is actually like directly correlated with the rate of change in the physical world, because as soon as a building changes, that information becomes outdated. So through our platform, we're thinking a lot about how can we or a network of partners be released for work directly through a product rather than a phone call or an email, to kind of start to mirror some of the really great consumer-facing products out there where you can just, dispatch a handyman or order a service. Similarly, I think that the design industry is kind of prepped for that disruption as well, because there are spatial products or certain types of spaces that may lend themselves to this kind of process. Office spaces are pretty similar across the board. So by narrowing in on kind of maybe we're not releasing mega projects on this kind of scale, but certainly there are, if you're signing a 3 to 5 year flex lease or something, and you just really need to hit the ground running, maybe there's an opportunity there to kind of start to turn your design service into like a SaaS model in some way. And there are certainly trade-offs that come with that as well, customization and standardization, but something I'm thinking about.
All right. Well, we're just about out of time. I guess we'll do one last question. So, and maybe you guys can give like a very quick answer. There's a couple questions that came in. I'm going to try to wrap them into like one sort of question. But essentially, so the questions kind of have to deal with like the handoff to the client. So like in the case, Betty, like the questions kind of, there's one that's more applied to you where it's like, what if like the results kind of conflict with your client interests? So like, how do you deal with like that handoff there in that case? And then for more, I think there's a question that's more geared toward like Chantal and Mary, where it's like, how are you kind of like assisting once you're kind of engaged with the client? How are you assisting with the handoff, or like, are you constantly kind of like managing that relationship, or is it, I mean, we've already you guys have each kind of touched upon these questions a little bit, but maybe if you can really quickly just give like a quick answer to those types of questions. So we'll go Betty, Mary, Chantal.
Sure. I think that question was actually what I think where our value is. That if you are able to show something that's really very different than what the customers were imagining, that means we are telling something that we are able to tell you something that you didn't know before using our tool. So I guess it depends on what the conflict is. Of course, there's this customer and service and product relationship here, but I think very so often for our products, they know that we are trying to produce some insights that weren't so easy to identify through a traditional way of designing or planning. So that's why we meant it to be a tool of assistance, not a decision maker. It's a assistant to the decision making. So I think we should really just have a very good format and informative format of way of delivering this message, and aiming to help our customers to understand how to use that message, even though it's conflicting. How do you improve, or is there anything that you're missing in the beginning that we can change the output of this, and understand what is the actionable next move for this outcome. So I think this is actually the value that we're providing.
Cool. Yeah, good point.
I would say for us, after we hand over our platform to the client, it's really all about relationship building after that. I mean, you can't, at the scale we're operating at, we cannot leave our clients alone. Like, that is not what we do. We actually don't even call them clients, we call them partners. We have executive level, we actually have like an advisory board of our clients, and we speak to them and we learn from them. We have monthly meetings with like our facilities teams. We have an immense amount of, like, I would call it white glove customer success, like service after this. With when you do get those new pieces of construction, right? Like, so someone switched out, a new tenant came in. How do we make sure that that information is now being fed into the twin? How do we make sure that we're not having like a data loss issue? There are so many complex systems inside these buildings that we are there. So it's a large effort. Yeah, I would say.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say similar to what Mary is saying. Our partners or clients are also, we have champions in all those organizations that we stay really closely in contact with, because at the end of the day, what we hand over, we're still doing active discovery for our product development. And so we need to understand how it's being used and kind of establish that feedback loop and keep it going. And, pivot if the client isn't getting the value or isn't understanding it, to the point of even doing, webinars or whatever we need to do to kind of rally everybody around this set of information that we deliver and help them understand it. So it is very high touch right now for us as well. I think from the product side, the goal, though, is to kind of create a UI for this information so that we don't have to do the same kind of onboarding that we're doing right now. The designer in me is dreaming of a future where all you have to do is log in, and it kind of, the product itself guides you through how to digest that information, and sort of almost a BI tool for your spaces. But for now, I think because of the scale also that we're working at, we're targeting whole portfolios rather than single projects with our partners. So it's very high touch. We're constantly kind of talking to different departments and doing a lot of discovery conversations along with that.
Cool. Well, I think we're out of time, but those were really great answers. I think This is a really awesome conversation. I hope everyone who's out there watching enjoyed it as much as I did. And yeah, I just thank you guys so much. So that's all we got. Thank you guys. Join us in the future sessions.